Peter Moore, Jason Swindlehurst, Alan McMenemy, Alec McLaughlin and Jason Cresswell. 5 Britons kidnapped in broad daylight from a Baghdad government building 2 years ago. But how were they kidnapped and why?
On the second day after the kidnapping, the Ministry of Defence called us and told us, "You must forget all about this subject. Completely forget it. Act as if you know nothing."
A Guardian investigation has uncovered possible collusion with the kidnappers. Here's how the kidnap happened. It's a sunny day in Baghdad, May the 29th, 2007. 5 British men are about to be kidnapped. It's nearly lunchtime, just before 12 midday. The kidnappers are in white Toyotas driving through the choking city traffic. They're heading to this building, the technology centre that's part of the Ministry of Finance. Inside the building are 6 unknowing Britons, 2 computer experts and their 4 bodyguards. Here, filmed for the first time, is the room where the men were kidnapped. The room where some of them were last seen alive.
My name is Peter Moore. I miss my family very much. I just want to get out of here.
And I feel we have been forgotten.
Physically, I'm not doing well. Psychologically, I'm doing a lot worse.
They were all, good, very, very good guys. It was a huge shock that a large group of armed police officers could get onto a government facility and conduct a kidnapping in broad daylight. That hadn't happened before. This was a unique scenario.
The government of Iraq tried its level best to get them released. And this is from day one. These people came to help Iraq. And that's why we, the Iraqi people and the government of Iraq, we feel very bad about it.
The Guardian has been investigating what really happened that day in May. There are suspicions that this was a kidnap that was allowed to happen at Iraqi government level. We have spoken to eyewitnesses, the former British military officer who spent 10 months investigating the kidnap, and senior Iraqi intelligence sources.
By chance that day, one of our cars was parked near the technology centre, by the Palestine Bank and the outpatients clinic. Suddenly, a load of cars came down the street. The convoy shut off the road.
What the kidnappers didn't know was that intelligence officers were watching everything. We have tracked down the senior Iraqi intelligence officer. He gives an extraordinary insider's account of what happened that day. What he says is shocking. He alleges collusion between Iraq's ministries of finance and interior with the kidnappers.
The cars were all marked as belonging to the Interior Ministry police. The kidnappers took the weapons off the guards who were standing at the entrance. They were driving Toyota Land Cruisers, the sort of cars that the commanders from the Ministry of the Interior drive. There were about 20 cars in all. Each car was carrying around 5 men, so there must have been 80 to 100 men involved. It was a very well-planned operation.
So, at least 80 kidnappers dressed in the uniform of Interior Ministry commandos drive brazenly into the compound of the Finance Ministry. They meet no resistance.
Only a government could carry out this level of operation. This wasn't an Al-Qaeda type of operation. They could get hold of 3 or 4 police cars maybe, but never 20 police cars, complete with uniforms. Al-Qaeda couldn't do that. This is the sort of thing only a government could do.
We have spoken to Iraqis who were working in the building that day, who witnessed what happened next.
I was at the reception desk when the kidnappers entered the building. There were so many of them, all heavily armed. They went upstairs and the employees began to run out of the building.
One of the kidnappers burst into my office and said, "Stay where you are and don't move." It was terrifying.
They kept shouting, sit down, to everyone they saw. No one stood a chance. They kicked anyone who was in their way.
The number of the kidnappers was huge. You could tell there were loads of them because of the sound of their running footsteps. It was unusual. It made so much noise. There was no gunfire, just the sound of running footsteps.
The eyewitnesses we spoke to say the kidnappers knew exactly which room to go to find the British men.
Yeah, my understanding was that when the kidnappers came into the building, they were waving kind of official documents and telling the team that they were under investigation for some kind of legal issue, so put down your weapons and come with us. So it must have been difficult for the team to know how to react to that. It wasn't obvious initially, I would think, that this is kidnapping.
The kidnappers entered the IT lecture room where Peter Moore and his team of security guards were sitting. It must have stunned them. All these men, who were apparently commandos from the Interior Ministry, bursting into this small space. A second computer expert, whose name has never been made public, had the luckiest escape of his life. He was in the toilet when the kidnappers swooped. They missed him. The 5 Britons were taken outside. Iraqi intelligence were on routine surveillance. They watched it all happen.
One group came out with 2 of the hostages. They put them in the first car. They weren't hooded or handcuffed. Then they brought the other 3 men out. Then they brought out the men's belongings, their briefcases and rucksacks. They put those things in a separate car.
Was there any resistance from these hostages? Did any of them scream or try and fight?
No, but they were probably in a great state of shock. Any hostage is like that. He doesn't know what to do, especially if he is not expecting such an event.
I miss my daughter and family very much and would like to return very soon. It seems here that time has no end.
I would like for the British government to please hurry. I'm appealing to you to please hurry and try and get this resolved as soon as possible. Thank you.
In the space of just 15 minutes, the lives of the men and of their families were changed utterly. 4 of them are now dead.
Jason Creswell was a friend of mine, and he was an extremely dedicated medic. And to give you an example of kind of the dedication of somebody like Jason Creswell, when he came back after his routine of the day, he would go and volunteer at the hospital in the Green Zone and work in accident emergency, dealing with casualties as they came in. They were all very kind, they were all very respectful. They all interacted very well with the Iraqis. We had a lot of Iraqi friends. I think they took a lot of pride in what they were doing.
The bodies of Jason Creswell and Jason Swindlehurst were given back to the British Embassy in June. They had been shot. Alec McLaughlin and Alan McMenemy are now dead. Peter Moore is still with his captors and believed to be alive. But why is Peter Moore apparently more valuable to the kidnappers? A man who worked as a volunteer in Guyana, a man who loved the freedom of his motorbike. Peter Moore's job was a highly sensitive one. He'd been imposed by the US State Department to put in a tracking system for missing funds. The Commission on Public Integrity in Iraq estimated that $18 billion had disappeared from the government's coffers by the time of the kidnap. Peter Moore's new tracking system was nearing completion when he was taken.
Maybe there are some people who don't want a very high level of corruption to be revealed. They just didn't want to be discovered. Remember, this is the Information Technology Centre. This is the place where all the money to do with Iraq and all Iraq's financial matters are housed. The centre is linked to the Americans and all the money transfers. Everything, right down to the last penny, is in that centre.
The former army officer who was in charge of the British bodyguards spent 10 months investigating the kidnap. He suspects collaboration.
Kidnapping took place on government property in the Ministry of Finance building where there was security in place. It strikes me as unlikely that there couldn't have been some kind of collaboration for a convoy of that size of 19 vehicles with 50 people in police uniforms just driving through the gate.
How, people ask, could they have been taken from a government ministry? What did you think at the time?
Well, the government institutions, they're not, if you like, infallible. There are some militias infiltrating these institutions. We had a rough idea who has taken them and where did they go.
And where did they go initially?
Well, we believe that they stayed in Baghdad for the initial period.
And then where were they taken?
We don't know. We don't know.
Do you know where in Baghdad they were initially?
Well, I can't be more specific.
But our intelligence sources claim that parts of the Iraqi government knew a great deal about the kidnapping, far more than they have ever admitted publicly.
On the second day after the kidnapping, the Ministry of Defence called us and told us, "You must forget all about this subject. Completely forget it. Act as if you know nothing and tell your colleagues not to say a word."
For the last 2 years, the only public word from the Iraqi government is that they've been doing their very best to get the British hostages back. And maybe they have. But who among them will answer the serious questions about just how these British men were kidnapped in the first place? And will they now help the last man left alive, Peter Moore?
I don't know what to say. Finish.